It is the autumn of 1938. In the basement of Harvard's Department of Hygiene, a young physician sharpens his pencil and opens a fresh notebook. Across from him sits a sophomore, nervous, polite, unaware that he is about to be measured, questioned, and followed for the rest of his natural life. The study that begins here will outlive its founders, its subjects, and nearly every assumption it sets out to test. The project has no grand name at first. It is simply called the Grant Study, after the department store magnate William T. Grant, who funds it. Its founder, Arlen Bock, believes medicine has spent too long examining the sick. He wants to know instead what makes a person well. Bock selects 268 Harvard sophomores, all male, all white, all considered promising. They are poked, measured, and interviewed. Their handwriting is analyzed. Their parents are visited at home. Even the shape of their brows is recorded in the dubious scientific fashion of the era. Among the young men chosen is a future president of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Others will become lawyers, doctors, journalists, and bricklayers. Some will rise, some will fall. Some will quietly disappear into ordinary lives, which is precisely what the study wants to understand. A few miles away, in the tenements of Boston's poorest neighborhoods, a second study begins. Led by the criminologist Sheldon Gluck and his wife Alina, it follows 456 boys from disadvantaged families. The Glucks want to know why some children survive hardship intact and why others do not. Decades later, these two very different cohorts will be braided together into a single, unprecedented investigation. The combined project becomes known as the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It is now the longest study of human happiness ever conducted. For more than 80 years, researchers have asked the same men, and later their wives and children, the most intimate questions imaginable. About love, about work, about regret. World War II arrives and the young men scatter. They land on beaches, fly bombing runs, and treat the wounded. Some come home decorated, some come home haunted. The study's files swell with letters from the front, written in cramped pencil, describing fear and friendship in equal measure. By the 1950s, the men are settling into careers and marriages. The researchers track every milestone: promotions, divorces, illnesses, the births of children. They administer questionnaires every 2 years and full physical examinations every 5. The data accumulates in filing cabinets, then in entire rooms. In 1966, a young psychiatrist named George Vaillant joins the project. He will come to define it. Vaillant is fascinated by what he calls the adaptive mechanisms of the ego, the unconscious strategies people use to cope with pain. Some men, he notices, mature into resilience. Others remain locked in patterns formed decades earlier. Vaillant pores over the files for the next 40 years. He notices that wealth and fame are poor predictors of later happiness. So is professional success. So, surprisingly, is cholesterol. The men who flourish in old age are not the ones with the strongest bodies or the highest salaries. They are the ones with the warmest relationships. One finding strikes Vaillant with particular force. The single strongest predictor of healthy aging at 50 is not a man's cholesterol level, but his level of satisfaction in his relationships. Loneliness, he concludes, is as toxic as smoking. Connection, it turns out, is a form of medicine. The study tracks men through divorces and remarriages, through the loss of parents, through their own children growing up and moving away. It records the slow erosion of bodies and the surprising endurance of certain friendships. Men who had felt securely attached to their mothers in childhood, the data shows, earn more in their later careers. The past, the study suggests, never quite lets go. By the 1970s, the limitations of the original sample have become impossible to ignore. The Harvard men were all white, all male, all privileged. The Gluck men were poor but also entirely male. Real life, the researchers concede, is more various than this. The study begins slowly to widen its lens. The wives are invited in, so are the children. By the early 2000s, more than 1,300 descendants of the original participants are being studied. The project becomes generational. It begins to ask not only what makes an individual life good, but what kinds of homes produce thriving human beings. In 2003, the psychiatrist Robert Waldinger takes over as the study's 4th director. He inherits filing cabinets, hard drives, and decades of human testimony. Waldinger, a practicing Zen priest as well as a Harvard physician, brings a quieter sensibility to the work. He wants to know what the data says plainly to ordinary people trying to live well. In 2015, Waldinger delivers a TED Talk summarizing 8 decades of findings. It is watched eventually by more than 40 million people. His message is disarmingly simple. Good relationships, he says, keep us happier and healthier. Period. The study's conclusions are in a sense ancient. Aristotle wrote of friendship as essential to the good life. The world's religions have said as much for millennia. But the Harvard project provides something philosophy and scripture could not. Evidence. Longitudinal, granular, hard-won evidence gathered across generations. The men who fared best, the data shows, were not necessarily the wealthiest or the most accomplished. They were the ones who, at age 50, had someone they could call in the middle of the night. They had tended their marriages. They had stayed in touch with siblings. They had invested deliberately in other people. Of the original 724 men, only a handful remain alive in the 2020s, well into their 90s and beyond. Their voices, recorded across the decades, form an extraordinary archive of a single human century. The study now follows their children and grandchildren, asking the same questions in new forms. The investigation, begun in a Harvard basement in 1938, continues. What makes a good life? The question is older than the study, and the study has not exhausted it. But after more than 8 decades of listening, the answer it offers is quiet and stubborn and clear. Not money, not fame, not even health in the end. The people we love and who love us back. That, the data says, is what holds a life together.